Hello and thanks for joining us on the program, People, Politics and Power. Our focus today is on the staggering numbers of Nigeria's out-of-school children. The United Nations Children's Education Fund, UNICEF, says Nigeria now has over 10.5 million out-of-school children. According to the UN agency, 60% of these numbers are girls. UNICEF says majority of the out-of-school children are also from northern Nigeria. Now, the chief of UNICEF field office in Kano, Rahama Farah, who made the disclosure recently, says the situation is has heightened the gender inequality in the country, where only 1 out of 4 girls from poor rural families complete junior secondary education. The UNICEF chief attributed the situation partly to the prevailing insurgency in the northeast and bandit attacks in the northwest, both of which have discouraged parents from sending their children to schools. The killings, the abductions, and the destruction of educational infrastructure have clearly created an unfavorable learning environment, resulting in a sharp drop in the number of children, especially girls, attending schools. In Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states, at least 802 schools remain closed, 497 classrooms destroyed, and another 1,392 other classrooms damaged. Until now, the figure for the out-of-school children in Nigeria revolved around 10 million or 10.5 million. Now, much less than the new figures that are beginning to be bandied around. What is therefore obvious is that the situation is worse than it is thought. It also clearly exposes the essence of accurate and credible data for proper and effective planning in the country. It has always taken the interventions of international agencies and organizations such as the UNICEF for Nigeria to identify the magnitude of its challenges, especially in the education sector. How can this current situation be tackled? What can and should be done by critical stakeholders, including governments, to expand and guarantee access to education for all, particularly for the girl child in northern Nigeria? How effective have federal and state governments' interventionist policies and agencies been in this regard? And what can the international community, particularly the international organizations, do to assist Nigeria in this regard? This is the focus of our discussion, and we'll be back in a moment to speak with our guests who are right here in the studio. Stay with us. Let's get to meet our guests who are right here in the studio. First is Mr. Peter Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins is the UNICEF country representative for Nigeria. Thank you so much, Mr. Hawkins, for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Also joining us is Dr. Osom M. Osom. He is the Acting Director, Social Mobilization of the Universal Basic Education Commission, UBEC. Thank you so much, Dr. Osom.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of my Chief Executive.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hawkins, from the UNICEF perspective, what is the situation with out-of-school children globally?
Globally, it's one of the biggest problems. 50% of the global figure of out-of-school children come from the continent, and about 12%, 15% specifically from here in Nigeria. It's a growing problem, but less to do with effort and more to do with demographics. we have to recognize, say for example in Nigeria, a lot has been done to try and encourage people to go to school, free school, initiatives in various states in trying to encourage children to go into school. But the pure numbers of the demographic bulge that is taking place means that the actual numbers of children who are unable to go to school or drop out of school becomes a significant problem. When you break it down, in actual fact, about 12% of out-of-school children in Nigeria are those who've never been to school. And then about 7% drop out between basic education and junior secondary education. I think though, in terms of your question, what UNICEF and UBEC tried to do, and SUBEBs at state level, is work together to try and ensure that, one, access to education is assured, two, that the quality of education is sufficiently good enough to ensure that children feel valued, and the life skills that they get out of that learning experience is valuable to them for their future career.
Dr. Som, Nigeria joined the rest of the world just recently to celebrate the International Children's Day. And every year we keep talking about providing for the Nigerian child and getting the Nigerian child access to quality education. Now, but from the figures that Mr. Hawkins has read out, between 12 to 15% of the 50% out of school children on the continent are in Africa. That's worrisome.
Yeah, sure it is. And I guess that's why the federal government is investing in basic education delivery. Of course, it should be stated clearly that this responsibility resides with the states and the local governments. But out of its concern, the federal government has provided interventions in this regard since 1999. And we're well aware of the fact that in spite of the efforts that the federal government is making, there are still going to be gaps, except there is a pool of opinion, there's a pool of support, there's a pool of collaboration between all tiers of government and, of course, non-state actors. Yes, it is a big challenge, but I believe that what UBEC is doing in line with federal government mandate is to ensure that steps are taken towards addressing the root causes of these challenges, providing the right infrastructure, and of course, advocating for more concerted stakeholder involvement towards delivering on quality basic education.
Tell us more about some of these efforts that you say the federal government is making, has been making, in ensuring that there's greater access to education for children.
Yes, of course, you're aware of the fact that running into years, consecutive governments have provided sufficient, so to say, fund for basic education delivery through the UBE matching grants. The federal government provides 2% of its consolidated fund to support state efforts in basic education delivery. That's very key. Secondly, the federal government has been using the part of this fund in providing strategic interventions in facilities for the delivery of basic education. Of course, you're sure that the federal government also has been intervening in other critical aspects of basic education delivery. Apart from infrastructure, the government is also investing in teacher development. The government is also advocating for equity practices, especially talking to local communities, and also reaching out to private sector players to provide a window and a platform for them to intervene in basic education delivery. That's what government has been doing.
Mr. Hawkins, let's go to the continental level and look at the 50% that you speak of and look at the gender component of that 50%. Where does it tilt towards?
It tilts towards more girls out of school than boys, but it also hides a very different picture at different levels of education. In some countries, in actual fact, there are more girls going to tertiary education than there are boys, and But I think the difficulty with girls' education and girls is at the time from moving from basic education to junior secondary education. I've traveled around Nigeria a lot, and it's the one area that I hear more than anything else is the number of junior secondary schools in proximity to the communities. And what that creates is a security barrier for girls traveling in and out of school, walking 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, or having to board, and then that creates another series of security measures that need to be put in place. So it's the number of schools and proximity to the communities that's probably the biggest issue for girls' education right at the moment, right across Africa. The second is around the facilities inside the school. One is more female teachers at basic and secondary education, and here the balance needs to be more at secondary education. Two are the facilities inside the schools, toilets for girls and toilets for boys, and segregation of those toilets. But third is a greater flexibility in the way that learning is produced, so that girls and boys can learn both in the school and out of school. And I think with UBEC, we recently, or the Ministry of Education recently launched the Learning Passport here in Nigeria, which allows teachers and pupils of all levels to access through an app the full curriculum. So if they want to catch up in the evening, they can do it on one of the phones or one of the devices that the family might have, download whatever part of the curriculum that they want to. They can also transgender through that. And this for girls is critically important. They have a greater acumen to be able to work for longer hours, and they have generally a greater incentive to be able to do things like that. So this gives them a more balanced way of learning.
But given the level of internet penetration in most parts of Africa, and particularly so in the rural communities in Nigeria, how is that playing out, the introduction of this app that you think would actually help to get more girls to start learning?
It's one of the areas we're working in to try and ensure that connectivity becomes more transcontinental, and here in Nigeria trying to make it as available as it is possible. And we're working with groups like IHS, with Airtel and so on and so forth, so that school-to-school connectivity, community-to-community connectivity, where there are black spots, for example, that connectivity can be provided there, so that no child can be left behind as much as is possible. And over the next 8 years, we hope that 20 million more people will be able to access the digital platform and be able to capitalize on initiatives like Learning Passport to be able to ensure that their learning is more comprehensive than it is at the moment.
Dr. Som, you just talked about the number of schools and the distance to some of these schools, particularly for girls, we create security situation, all of that. What exactly is being done to address the issue of the number of schools and the safety of those schools? I asked that question against the backdrop of the fact that there was a time that there was a school safety program initiative. Nobody seems to be talking so much about it anymore.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it's good for us to admit the fact that UBEC does not own any school. Indeed, UBEC takes the extra step of supporting the states in setting up structures that will, in a lot of ways, enhance access to basic education. But then what UBEC does is to support the effort of states. Now, if a state sets up a learning institution at the basic education subsector and looks out or reaches out to UBEC for its support, definitely UBEC will provide that. But I should be able to talk about some of the things that have come on board since the chief executive that we have at the moment, Dr. Hamid Boboyi, came on board. efforts have been made to create and establish the smart schools, basically dealing with issues of quality. Steps have been taken to establish the open schooling program at the basic education subsector. Steps have been taken to ensure that schools are becoming more effective in their teaching and learning processes as UBEC concludes its plans to bring on board what it calls the effective school program. All these are supposed to assist states' efforts in providing that kind of conducive environment for learners, whether they be girls or they are boys. But I should also say that for addressing the challenge of that equity in basic education delivery, UBEC has put in place and established the model girl-child schools. These are specifically for the girl child, taking into consideration their needs, and these schools are available in the areas that are very endemic to this challenge. And that's what UBEC has been doing. And is still looking out for further opportunities in addressing the challenge of the out-of-school phenomenon targeting the girl child. I should say that, for instance, recently UBEC has completed and handed over to the Nasarawa state government a second chance school. That school specifically deals with the girl child, those that have been out of school for a while, a completely brand new facility with relevant and appropriate infrastructure for learning and for the acquisition of skills. UBEC has been doing a lot in that regard, and like I said earlier, the option is for the states to take the initiative and live up to the constitutional mandate to provide for basic education for its citizens.
It's one thing to provide a constitutional mandate for states.
Yep.
Is another for these things to happen. So how much synergy is ongoing between UBEC and the suburbs at that level? Particularly, we had to reach communities in some of these states.
Yes, I'm sure that you are aware of the fact that UBEC engages with the state counterparts on a very, very timely basis in addressing challenges. UBEC engages with them. Of course, the executive secretary is open to receive the suburb chairman at whatever time his doors are open. UBEC has a very free flow line of communication between itself and the states. UBEC undertakes the quarterly meeting between the UBEC management and the chairman of the State Universal Basic Education Boards. And I'm sure also that suburbs and UBEC do interact at the high level, at the level of policy, at meetings that are hosted by the Federal Ministry of Education. Indeed, there's a free flow of interaction and information and communication between UBEC and suburbs. And that will, power and that determination is there on the part of the executive secretary of UBEC and his management team in partnering with the states in addressing challenges that has to do with basic education delivery.
Mr. Hawkins, does UNICEF partner only with the federal government, that's only at the federal level, or does it go down to states and possibly local governments where this problem really is?
Yeah. No, UNICEF, we have 9 fully functioning professional offices around the country, north, south, central, east and west, and work at 19 states, in 19 states with SUBEBs and the commissioners of education and also other partners in those states, which are critical in ensuring that education is delivered in a way that the child can use that learning to meet their own aspirations. But I think the investment in education is key. The Minister of Finance recently announced an increase to 7.5% on education. But it's now the challenge is how that money goes down to the relevant levels and is invested in the girls' and boys' education and released in a timely fashion so that it can have a positive impact on the girls and the boys at educational level. The second area is around the quality, and I think there's a lot being done in trying to ensure that teacher training is of a level that can meet that quality needs. But there's also initiatives like teaching at the right level, which allows for children, girls and boys to effectively learn numeracy and literacy so that they can develop the life skills on their own to be able to meet their aspirations. And that is critical in any society, but especially in a society where there are a large number of out-of-school children. The third is around the Safe School Initiative, the financing of Safe School. Abuja hosted the International Safe School Conference in October last year, and the declaration that came from there. Not only is it looking at safe schools across the globe, it's also looking at ensuring that schools are not used by military entities for other purposes. It's also looking at the security of children within a school. And last week was, as you said, it was the Day of the Child. One of the areas there was around bullying, and how can we affect a safe environment for children in schools, positive discipline, respect for each other, and the stopping of bullying. And all of these factors come into being. But I think the most important area that I've seen is about the relationship between the community and the schools. And that's, we have to keep working on that through school-based management committees who extend into the communities. But it's also trying to ensure that the communities understand and respect the value of learning. And this is the most crucial factor in a country like Nigeria and many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, where some of these crises have impacted on that value chain. I see children in every school down the streets. Maiduguri is a classic example. If you went to Maiduguri in 2015, 2016, there were no children. You go now, today, at 8 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock at lunchtime, 3 in the afternoon, and later on in the early evening, the place is full of children getting into kekes, moving around in a traffic jam with thousands and thousands of girls and boys going to school. There has been a fantastic improvement in access to education. What we need to do is keep investing on building on that and keep investing on the quality of that learning.
We have touched on an issue that I tended to come to later on, but now that you brought it up, let's talk about it, which is the impact of the insecurity, the insurgency, the banditry in parts of the country on education, children's education particularly. You just spoke about Maiduguri, how there are so many school children in Maiduguri. And of course, one explanation for that is that many of these children have had to move from their rural communities into Maiduguri, an urban center, flooded the place. But the task is getting these people to get back to their communities and have safe learning environment in these rural communities, hard-to-reach communities. But the insurgency, the banditry, and the general insecurity in parts of the country is making that very difficult. How can international organizations like yours assist in this regard?
I think it's an important point, and this is the Safe School Declaration, which is important, the financing of safe schools, which was hosted by the Minister of Finance. These are all very important issues. 207 schools across the Sahel, so in West Africa, had to be closed because of insecurity. Were attacked, because of insecurity. 22 schools up to December, 1 year up to December 2021 in Nigeria were attacked. 1,436 children have been abducted. These are staggering figures. Now, you've got to look at it in many ways. One is the impact it has on those children themselves, especially those children who've still not been released by the kidnappers. Two, on the cost to the economy. We believe that the number of children, 1,400 that were kidnapped last year, and the subsequent closure of schools in the Northwest probably costs to a region of 3.4 billion in unearned income to the economy in the longer term. The Northeast is a very different matter. That's an active conflict area. And the figures have all been bandied about, but there has been a substantial increase in the number of children who have accessed either formal or informal education. The challenge is to keep up with the sheer number of children that materialize every year, because you get a new cohort coming in, to make sure that the throughput remains as high as we can. We've built over 400 classrooms across the Northeast to try and accommodate that. The key to all of this is the rights of the child and the right for the child to access education. So whatever the conflict, whatever the criminality or whatever the politics, at the end of the day the child is an innocent victim and has a right to education, and all sides and all parties need to respect that.
Dr. Som, the logic behind the establishment of UBEC, for example, at the time it was set up, was to be an interventionist agency of government. And at that time, the whole scenario of the insecurity in the country today was not contemplated. Yeah. Now it has come to be. We now have insurgency in the Northeast, banditry in the Northwest and North Central, and wherever abductions are taking place and all of that. And I'm just wondering how much UBEC has risen to these new realities and what is actually doing. I mean, from year to year, maybe your budgetary allocation may not have changed very much to deal with these new situations. So how are you dealing with these new realities on ground?
I guess it's clear to all of us that security concerns are not within the purview of UBEC's mandate. Now, UBEC works towards ensuring that the school environment is safe and child-friendly. Issues of security, when it comes to the school environment, UBEC best deals with it by ensuring that it advocates to the community for them to own the responsibility for working towards the security of the children at the school level. Beyond that, UBEC supports government efforts at ensuring that there is security everywhere in the schools and out of school. But what UBEC does is that it ensures that through its partnership with the communities, it sustains active community involvement in basic education delivery. And that happens through the school-based management committees. UBEC supports the SBMCs, not only in terms of advocacy, it provides funding. Currently, UBEC is utilizing its funds that part of the 2019 school improvement project to fund 1,473 projects in school communities across the country, and most of these schools are in the rural communities. So it advocates for best practices, it encourages community people to own the process and to stand up in defense of the process, while at the same time working with other government agencies that are in charge of security to ensure that the school environment is safe for the child.
So how much is the availability of credible data impacting on the work that UBEC is doing?
I should say that before now, most of the data that you found, we had in the public domain were speculations. But in 2018, UBEC undertook the national personnel audit in the basic education subsector. That exercise produced a figure of 10.1 out-of-school children. That exercise remains very credible. UNICEF was a part of it. Most other international agencies were a part of it. It was a wide array of stakeholders that worked together to come up with that very legitimate figure. Now, data is very important in planning, and UBEC understands that too well. That's why in the next few weeks, UBEC will be kickstarting the national personnel audit towards, again, coming to the point where it can tell Nigerians very credibly, this is the number of out-of-school children. Beyond the issue of out-of-school children, UBEC requires that data for effective planning, effective system management, and UBEC looks out for the support of international agencies, and I'm sure they're going to be willing to support that process towards having substantial data that we can all use as basis for planning and the management of basic education in Nigeria.
All right, well, let's take a short break. When we return, very quickly, we'll be talking more about data and its impact on effective planning. All right, Mr. Hawkins, the last quoted data by Dr. Som was collected in 2018. Between then and now, this is 2022, about 3-4 years down the line. Have there been any remarkable changes between then and now?
I think we need to recognize that the 2018 survey was around basic education, which is UBEC's domain, and we worked very closely with them. And it showed that there had been a reduction as a percentage of children in school to out of school. So the number of children in school was had increased, and the percentage of children out of school had decreased. But since then, and this is the demographic, the number of children eligible to go into school has increased significantly, and the absorption capacity inside schools has not increased to the right levels. So, but going back to your data issue, there is the Education Management Information System, and that works fairly well right across the country. It's a state level responsibility, which is then escalated up to the federal level. That gives us good and reliable data about entrance and continuation of education at school. It gives you also data about teachers, although that needs to be expanded upon. Then you have the intermittent multi-indicator cluster surveys. We've just completed one now with the National Bureau of Statistics. It'll be released over the next couple of weeks. That gives you also an indicator of the learning that is taking place and the number of children going in and out of school. So the data is there. The big problem with Nigeria, as indeed in many other countries, is the census hasn't been done, so we haven't got 100% grip on the demographics. So you're always comparing with a theoretical number of children coming through, and birth registration is still very, very low. I think it's about 33%, and we're looking to increase that significantly over the next 3 years so that universal birth registration is possible. And then you get much better analytical data. But the Education Management Information System gives sufficient data at the moment at state level for decisions to be made. And one of the biggest decisions, as I said, is about investment in basic education and junior secondary education. The last period of major investment was in 2006 after the debt relief. I think it was $13 billion was set aside to realize the MDGs. A similar type level of investment in education is required now to be able to significantly increase the number of especially junior secondary schools across the country and the right number of teachers to be able to ensure that those schools function effectively. But that will take a number of years. Whatever you invest tomorrow is going to take a number of years to do it. In the meantime, is looking at alternative ways of children accessing learning. And the learning passport is one way, digital learning is another way, teaching at the right level is a third way to ensure that literacy and numeracy can be expanded right across all communities. Because let's not forget the resilience, the ingenuity and the sheer talent of Nigerian children is all there. It's just creating that platform, that little lift to allow them to go forth. And this is why learning is so important. It's about the life skills. It's not sitting inside a classroom. That is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It's giving those children outside who cannot sit inside the classroom for whatever reason to be able to learn and then be able to aspire to a future where they're contributing to the economy and the social fabric of this country.
That's awesome. The whole question of access comes with two components, quantity and quality. In as many communities as possible across Nigeria today, I'm lucky that I've had the opportunity to travel to so many rural communities over time. You still see children learn under trees. How much of quality is guaranteed in such circumstances? And what can UBEC do to help the suburbs and all the other school management organizations to improve on this?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Basically, a larger chunk of the UBEC Intervention Fund goes into infrastructural development. And states also have the budgets for education service delivery. Like Mr. Hawkins talked about, it's basically that the intervention requires constant upscaling so that it can meet the demands on the ground. UBEC is also opening up alternative platforms for learning because the infrastructural gap is huge, and this is from state to state. It's not the same across all the states. Some states have fairly better classroom spaces and children are not learning under the tree, but other states have such instances. What UBEC does is that it encourages suburbs to provide for such needs with their action plans. And that's key to resolving the challenge with the issue of access. UBEC also wants to emphasize at all times that if the states and the communities prioritize the value of education, some of those challenges that you're noting will be addressed. You find that in some instances, the school community could be waiting for some big fund from somewhere before they repair an infrastructure that requires just a little need. So that's what is ongoing at UBEC, providing for priority attention on infrastructural development through the UBEC intervention funds, and also encouraging community ownership and community interest. Like I talked about with the UBEC School-Based Management Committee School Improvement Project, that's been ongoing and it largely targets infrastructural development.
How is or how the goals of the MDGs as far as education is concerned integrated into the UBEC vision?
Basically, it's to have at the end of the day quality learning for every child. UBEC is not only focusing on infrastructure, UBEC is focusing on quality. I earlier talked about the fact that the current leadership at UBEC, led by Dr. Boboyi, is emphasizing on quality learning. And that quality commences with making sure that the Nigerian child fares comparatively well with other parts of the world in terms of e-learning, in teaching, and other aspects of education. I talked about the smart schools. I talked about the open schooling program that UBEC is currently planning to implement, as well as the effective school program that UBEC is planning to implement. There are other aspects of learning that really are focused on quality. I should talk about the fact that this issue of out-of-school children, you were talking about the data that we have in 2018, and of course UBEC will be doing another round of personal audit soonest. But we need to take into consideration the fact that the BESDA program, Better Education Service Delivery for All, sponsored by the World Bank, is making a lot of effort in pulling out-of-school children into the classroom. And that's been going on for the past 2 years. And tremendous results are coming out from that direction. There was a time the Federal Ministry of Education indeed announced that there was a drastic reduction in the number of out-of-school children from the initial 10.1. And BESDA is making tremendous progress, especially in learning facilities that are kind of non-formal in nature. The results are there. And BESDA is not only focusing on providing access, it's talking about retention, and also talking about the fact that at the end of the day, because of the fact that this is a result-driven intervention, the children that are in school are actually learning and have evidence that they are learning.
Mr. Hawkins, the MDGs target date of 2030 is less than 8 years away. You earlier on spoke about investment in education, which of course in most sub-Saharan African countries is lagging behind. Whereas the UN makes a recommendation of about 25% annual investment in education. Most countries like Nigeria are less than 10%, 7, 8 as the case may be, and all of that. How confident are you that 2030 will not come and go just like the previous exercise, and we will not be anywhere near where the set goals are supposed to hit?
The Sustainable Development Goals, number 4, is around education. And we've just done an evaluation for Nigeria, but this is the case across sub-Saharan Africa, that it would be highly unlikely to be achieved. We know that now, whatever investment is made, it will not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. That's not because of education alone, it's because of the whole structure of governance and ownership by both communities and governments and their investment in education. But I think what we've got to look at is the incremental steps that are taking place already now, and what else needs to be done to be able to build on that. And we've talked about some of it, the investment in education. I mean, a real push to invest in education over the next 2 to 3 years will be critical to understand better what a country like Nigeria or Ethiopia or what have you can do. But it's also that access issue is so critical. It's about access to learning. We have the ability now, the global technology, to be able to ensure that a child, wherever they are, has ability to access that learning, and it's facilitating that. You asked earlier on about the child under a tree or a child in a classroom. A child in a classroom where there is a violence and excessive discipline will learn far less than a child under a tree where there is an environment of safety and equality, for example. So it's the environment in which the children are learning and taking place. Secondly, it's the type of learning. There's the academic learning, and that's working well. The curriculum in Nigeria is good. It needs to just progress and keep going. But the focus on life skills and literacy and numeracy is critical in the well-being of that learning. And then it was when you get to 7th grade, 8th grade, where you could choose whether to continue an academic or go down the skills route. In a country like Nigeria, that skills route becomes very important to look at. And at the moment, we're working with the Ministry of Education in developing that curriculum so that children can choose a skills area. What you want is that children, girls and boys, need to reach the age of 18 feeling confident in themselves, having the life skills to be able to integrate with society, and the aptitude to be able to develop a livelihood where they are not only making a positive contribution to society, but also an economic livelihoods that allows them to become independent and develop on their own.
Now let me put you on the spot a little bit here, Mr. Hawkins. what level of investment do you think that a country like Nigeria should be making on an annual basis to bring us to some level, to some standard that would then be acceptable globally?
There are global figures on the minimum number of percentage of a budget that needs to go on education. In the case of Nigeria, where the GNI and the GDP don't equate to the budget, which is 33 billion or what have you, it's very difficult to say. We are actually now working on that exact issue. What is the investment required for a case like Nigeria to ensure that access and quality of learning, and I'll put it that rather than just education, is required to take place? Or what is the cost if that investment is not made? And it's the cost that is striking in a country like Nigeria. As I explained to you, the 1,431 children who were abducted and the consequential closure of schools or children not going to school costs in the region of 3.4 billion unearned income. So it's a theoretical amount of money. Can you imagine when you magnify that across the board? And this is the crucial thing, is it's not only the level of investment, but if that investment is not made, what is the cost to the country?
Dr. Osam, what do you think, let me put it this way, technology, the role of technology in reducing the numbers of out-of-school children, what do you think that role will be, should be, and will be in the years to come?
Very fantastic. Of course, you know, the world is going technology, and Nigeria cannot be left behind, and there's no aspect of social service delivery that should be left behind. Technology will ensure that access is broadened. Remote learning is key to addressing the challenge of out of school, like we already talked about. And UBEC has already, UBEC has keyed into that intervention. That's why it's working assiduously towards ensuring that its smart schools come on stream. The out of school open schooling program comes on stream. The effective schools come on stream. Currently, UBEC is doing capacity development for teachers in the area of integrated learning approaches using electronic methods and all that. And so much is going on at UBEC. Quality assurance is going on to really identify those key points that requires concerted strategic intervention. UBEC really appreciates this fact and is working hard towards allowing technology permeate its activities, teaching, learning, even governance structures. Currently, the BESDA program is looking at DLI-7. DLI-7 talks about using digital devices to track attendance in schools, and it's working out quite fine.
Did we learn any quick lessons from the COVID era interventions as far as school learning is concerned? Most private schools adopted certain measures that kept their students and their pupils learning while COVID lasted. But of course, public schools could not afford that.
Yes, a number of states already had those things in place. Lagos was already doing something. Edo State was already doing something. Kaduna was already. I can go on and name them, but the fact remains that where leadership takes responsibility for such things, it becomes easy to avoid unnecessary, like the kind of emergency that we had during the COVID period. UBEC supported that effort greatly, and I'm glad also to note that the Federal Ministry of Education did provide a platform that learners, students, and pupils can leverage on technology, online learning opportunities to undergo their studies or go ahead with their studies during the COVID period. Yes, there's a whole lot of gaps in that direction, but COVID opened up the entire education space and brought to the fore the fact that we need to think technology. And I'm glad that UBEC and the SUPEPs really took advantage of it, and the FME And so much is going on in that direction, sir.
Mr. Hawkins, on a final note, I visited countries like Liberia and Sierra Leone after their wars, several years after, and even up to now. They are still smarting from the disruption of education, the destruction of infrastructure, which is what is possibly going on in the Northeast and Northwest at the moment because of the insurgency and banditry. What are your concerns as far as that is concerned for Nigeria?
I think we're very concerned that children should have an uninterrupted access to learning. And if I may, I praise UBEC and the Federal Ministry of Education and SUBEBs and their Commissioners of Education for, during COVID, adapting the learning modalities so that many children could access learning through the radio and through other apparatus. And it was state by state, I accept that, but there was a wakening up. And the Learning Passport is 14,000 documents have been downloaded onto an app and is accessible to any of us. And I think the key here, and this is both Northwest, Northeast, but also South-South and other places where physical access becomes difficult. The young people are adept at using technology. They're much better than you or I. And I'm not saying that you're not young. You are very young. But their ability to use technology to their advantage and their way of doing it is like that. And what we have to do is make that available to them. Nothing replaces the face-to-face, whether it's in a school, whether it's under a tree, of interaction with a teacher and with other pupils. But digital learning, use of technology, enhances their life skills, enhances their learning experience, and expands their horizons.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hawkins. Peter Hawkins is the UNICEF country representative for Nigeria, and Dr. Osom M. Osom is the acting director, social mobilization at UBEC, that is the Universal Basic Education Commission. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, that's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.